Hello, friends. I'm Jeffrey Rosen, President and CEO of the National Constitution Center, and welcome to We the People, a weekly show of constitutional debate. The National Constitution Center is a nonpartisan nonprofit chartered by Congress to increase awareness and understanding of the Constitution among the American people. In this episode, I'm thrilled to share a conversation I had on Constitution Day with Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch and his co-author, Janie Nitze. It was about their new book, Overruled: The Human Toll of Too Much Law. Enjoy the conversation. Hello, friends. Happy Constitution Day. It is so exciting to welcome you to the National Constitution Center and to welcome Justice Gorsuch and Janie Nitze. Let's begin, as we always do when we have the privilege of convening in this sacred space, by gazing at the words of the First Amendment, which are behind me, and now look at Independence Hall, where it all happened. The Declaration and the Constitution were drafted, and just look at it for a moment and feel the energy. Kindling passion in the ideals of the Declaration and the Constitution is what this day is all about. It's been an amazing day, which started with a ceremony for new citizens, and there's nothing more inspiring that any of us has the privilege of doing than watching new citizens take the oath. And it included a great town hall with Justice Gorsuch and Janie Nitze, with teachers who are introducing into the classroom the new Constitution 101 class that we launched today with Khan Academy. And it's just a thrill to see this remarkable class and the caliber of the scholars and historians that we've assembled to teach the essence of the Constitution free to high school students across the country, the depth of the primary sources. I'm so proud to be part of the amazing team that put this together, and we think it's going to transform civic education in America. And now we have the great privilege of talking with the Justice and Janie about his new book, Overruled. I should say how compelling it is in telling human stories of people who encountered the toll of too much law. And we're just going to begin with the obvious question. Justice Gorsuch, why did you decide to write this book?
Well, first of all, can I say thank you? Jeffrey, thank you. Thank you for having me and Janie here today. We, in addition to meeting with teachers from around the country, some of whom I see in the audience, we met with students. And you held a wonderful session with a bunch of students in your auditorium where we got to talk about the Declaration and the Constitution today. And watching what you do on Constitution Day, it's like Christmas in this building. It really is. It's fabulous. Ben Franklin was wandering around telling stories. There was a Constitution cake and games out on the lawn. It's inspiring, the work you do here, Jeffrey. And I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Because if there is hope for this country, and I am hopeful, it comes from places and people like this and you.
Thank you.
Second thing is I want to introduce three people real quick. First, Janie, who you've just heard about. Janie is one of the most remarkable young women of her generation that I've ever encountered. Her family came to this country from Czechoslovakia, escaping communism in 1968. First generation of this country, an immigrant. And 3 degrees from Harvard. One in physics, another in statistics, and the last one in law. Now, where she went wrong on that course, I don't know. She clerked not just for me, but also for my colleague, Justice Sotomayor. She's held a Senate-confirmed, presidentially appointed post, and she has with her two of our three children here are with us tonight. Claudia and Anne, and we have had a lovely Constitution Day, haven't we? We even got a tour of Independence Hall together, and it has been a lot of fun. So thank you for allowing me to make that introduction. You had a question.
The question is, why'd you write the book?
Why did we write the book?
Why'd you write the book?
Well, I love our Constitution, and I know you do, and that's why you're here. And thank you for coming out tonight. This is not exactly everybody's idea of a date night, but it apparently is some of yours. So thank you. I've been a judge for 18 years, or something like that. And I had just come to see too many cases where ordinary Americans are just trying to go about living their lives, secure the blessings of liberty for themselves and their families, trying to hurt no one, who've just been caught up in ways that you can't even imagine without really appreciating the depths of their stories, in laws that they didn't foresee, couldn't have foreseen in many cases. And their lives were just ruined. And whether it's a veteran who's seeking benefits for his disability, who follows the letter of the law to a T. But it turns out there's a regulation that everyone concedes is inconsistent with the law. He doesn't follow that, and he's still denied disability benefits. Whether it's an immigrant to this country who follows not just the law, but the judicial precedent about the law, and then is told by an agency later that now that doesn't count, we disagree with the judicial precedent, ignore it, and now you have to start all over again and spend 10 years out of the country when you have 4 children here in the United States. Or whether it's a company, small home health care company in Kansas. I used to sit on the 10th Circuit in the Western United States. It's accused of Medicare fraud. Well, that's a big deal, and I take that very seriously, and that can ruin your business. That can kind of be it. And it turns out that they followed all, not just the statute, but all the regulations under the statute perfectly. The ones that were in effect at the time they provided the services, and were being accused of violating regulations that were enacted or adopted only later. And it takes 6 years of litigation before the case makes it all the way up to my court and people figure that out. The agency is so confused by the number of regulations that it produces that it just got mixed up. And I just saw too many of those cases, too many of those cases. And I thought it was time for me to explore what's going on with our law and whether maybe we need to think about some of the changes that have happened in our law in our lifetime. And that's why we sat down to write the book.
Well, your passion comes through, and Janie, you worked with the justice. What did you learn in the course of helping him tell all these stories?
I'll back up even further than that, if it's all right with you. I didn't come from a family of lawyers, didn't know a whole lot about law when I went to law school first, and I always, when learning about the Constitution, understood it by virtue of the powers and the rights, but I never fully appreciated until I started to clerk for the justice just how much everything came down to is all about the individual. Every word in the Constitution that is there is really written to protect the individual, and it is our government and sort of self-government, all that. And so when the justice came to me and said, sort of, what about this book that tells the stories of individuals? I sort of thought, how perfect, because it really takes me back sort of 15 years to when I was first clerking for him in Denver. And sort of there's this very common thread of who he is as a justice and how he views the law, that he never loses sight that there is an individual behind it. Just writing the book with him, I not only learned so much from working with him, but it was really incredible to talk to some of the people who lived the cases that I had once read just sort of as Supreme Court opinions and read through the lens of law, and sort of take Sandra and John Yates, who I'm sure the justice will talk about, really talking to Sandra Yates and hearing from her what they went through. It made so much more real what the law can do, both for good and for not so good for people in this country.
So just to follow up on that, I mean, here's what we found when we started digging in. You know, you have this anecdotal sense there's something going on, but you want to check your work, right? You want to see if you're right. We all think Congress isn't busy these days, that they should do more. Does anyone know that they write 2 to 3 million words of new law every year? That's Congress. And guess what? That's just the tip of the iceberg. Agencies, federal agencies promulgate regulations, 60 to 70,000 pages of new regulations every year. That's new. That number is new. And it's happened really since about 1970 is what we've discovered. This isn't a New Deal thing. This isn't a 1950s thing. This is about 1970 if I had to peg it. There are 6,000 maybe federal criminal laws on the books. In fact, nobody really knows how many federal criminal laws there are. They gave up counting them in the 1980s. It's going like this. And that too is the tip of the iceberg. There are, by, again, estimates, because nobody can count them all, maybe 300,000 federal regulatory crimes that agencies have promulgated through their regulations. And this is a feature of the law that has changed in my lifetime, it turns out. And so that's really, if you want to know what we found out, that's what we found out. And chances are pretty good, according to people who are really quite thoughtful about this and not joking, that you have probably committed a federal felony today, each and every one of you.
There's a Constitution Center exemption, so everyone is safe. It's such a powerful argument. Why did law explode in the 70s and 80s?
Well, I think we could maybe point to many. I mean, there are undoubtedly many causes. But one thing that I can't help but come back to time and time again, and I think I'd like you to talk about this too, is social trust, right? When Tocqueville came to this country in the 1830s, he marveled that where a great project had to be undertaken in Britain, a lord would lead it. In France, a government would lead it. In America, people just got together and did it. Whether you needed a new hospital or a new school or a new charity needed to be undertaken, people just got together and did it. It was that voluntary association that he said separated America from the old world. And I think, and this is not a disparagement of government or law. I'm a lawyer. I serve as a judge. I've chosen that life, hardly. It's just a question about, is there a golden mean in most things in life? Is there maybe in law as well, right? You don't want to have too much, you don't want to have too little, right? Just right? Okay. And those are the sorts of things that we wanted to look at in the book. Go ahead, Jenny.
I want to hear your thoughts, Jenny, but that's a powerful thesis. Tocqueville predicts in the 19th century that overregulation might in the future come to infiltrate America because of a decline in civic virtue.
Yeah.
Did it happen in the 70s and 80s because of a decline of trust?
Again, I think there's sort of many factors at stake, but we did find when we were looking at sort of certain, surveys had been taken over the years, sometimes by the same organization, and you can sort of track a lack of trust in one another that seems to coincide with the rise of law. And as we say in the books, right, if you can't trust your neighbor, if you can't trust yourself, if you can't trust your local officials, your local school to make these decisions, like, so where is there to turn to but law? And I think we saw some of this in COVID, which we talk about in the book, where there was sort of an inclination, sort of less to trust our neighbors and communities and schools, and more of an inclination to turn to law to answer sort of some fairly profound questions for us.
Well, you look at like some statistics, right? Increasingly, polls show that we think of the people who are of the other political persuasion, not just as wrong, fair enough, right? That's why we have elections. But as evil, right? And those numbers have gone like this. You ask young people today, the polls increasingly show that they think it's acceptable to silence people with whom they disagree on college campuses. And of course, that's